All right, welcome back. We are going to be continuing with these firebase authentication. So far, if you watched the previous video, we have built a skeleton for a little app. We have our home. We have a component to show us all the users in our application. We have a login as well as a sign up. They don't currently actually do anything. They just push us to a page. I could write anything in here and anything in here and get pushed to our home page. And same for the login. So, and it doesn't actually add any users yet. And the way we've built this out, so as a quick reminder, we have a backend folder. Our backend has, looking at our environment variable for our database, we're using PG promise to connect to our database. Our schema doesn't really have much in it. It's just got our users table that has an ID and an email. We used to have this, and so we created our database locally on our machine already. So I've commented this out to make deployment a little bit quicker and easier. We have our app. Our app essentially just has our user routes. That's at API users. It's going to go through there. It's got an error handler and a listener. Our routes itself just listens for create all users as well as to fetch all users. And for our queries, they are just creating a user and fetching a user. That's our backend. And in our front end, we have React Router DOM. We are showing a nav bar and we have a few different routes. And we have those components that we saw. Okay, so to start adding Firebase, we're in the front end. I'm going to install Firebase. That's going to be my first thing. Sorry, npm install Firebase. And I'm going to wait for that to happen. It has been a while since I've committed. So let's go ahead and just check that out. It's been like way too long. Skeleton complete. Okay, so we do have the skeleton. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's go ahead and start with creating a Firebase configuration file. So in my source, I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call this firebase.js. And inside of here, I am going to import I'm going to import app, we'll say, from firebase/app. And I'm going to import our firebase/auth. Okay, now I am going to need a variety of keys from our backend, from our environment variables that are given to us by Firebase. So the first thing I'm going to make a change. I'm going to go into the root of my front end, and I'm going to create a file called .env for my environment variables in my front end. And I want to make sure that this is also being ignored by GitHub. So I'm just going to add a .env into our git ignore, and we see that it's being grayed out. So it's safe to know that our git is not tracking it, and we can check it because we just did a git a minute ago. So we can say git status, and we see we've updated our ignore and our package JSON and Firebase, but we don't have anything about our environment variables. So that's really good. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is actually go to Firebase and start a new project. So I'm going to go ahead to go firebase.google.com. I'm going to press get started. start my new app. I'm going to add a project, and let's just call this firebase auth. Oops, firebase auth demo. Continue. I'm going to continue. Going to just default account for Firebase. I'm going to create my project, and I'm going to wait a second while this is creating. Okay, now that this has created, I'm going to press continue. And here I have my Firebase auth project. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our authentication. I'm going to set up a sign-in method. I'm going to choose email and password, and I'm going to go ahead and enable it and save it. Great. And I'm going to go back to my project overview. So if I click here, I'm going to be given some data about this application. So go ahead and click there. Okay, once you've clicked there, you'll get taken to this page, and you can go ahead and make a little nickname for your app. So I'm going to call this, again, Firebase auth demo. I'm not interested in setting up hosting, but I am going to register my app. And then I'm going to be given all of the secret stuff. So I'm going to copy all this, and I'm going to paste this into my environment variable. Now I am going to want to make a change. So I need my variables in this environment to look like this, or I have my React app key. And also, I'm just going to take these and transfer them. Whoops. This is annoying. Okay. Sorry. And transfer all these things over. Okay, so go ahead and transfer all these things now. Okay, so now that I've transferred all those things over, I'm going to save my env file and go ahead and close that. I won't need that anymore. And I'll also just go ahead and continue to console over here. And I'm going to return to my app. So now I have to figure out a way to use that Firebase information here in my front end. So we're going to return to our firebase.js, and we are going to import those. So I'm going to say const. I'm going to do object destructuring. I'm going to say React API key. So I'm just all of those ones from before. So we have our React API key, our React app auth domain, database URL, et cetera, et cetera. Just want to have even spacing. There we go. And this is all going to come from our process.env. Next, I am going to make a configuration object. So I'm going to say const config. And this is going to be like the original object that I received. So it's going to look like so. It's going to have our app key pointing to our React app API key, our auth domain pointing to that, etc. And I'm going to initialize our app. So I'm going to say app.initialize app, and I'm going to pass in our configuration key and also export our app. Okay, so I'm saving that, and I should be good to go for that step. So now, the first thing I should do is restart my React server. So once I've changed something in those environment variables, I need to restart. So I'm going to kill the server and restart. Okay. And so I get back taken to this page, And now I have Firebase hooked up to my React project, but I'm not actually using it anywhere in my project. So let's go ahead and change that. So the first thing I want to do is add some helper functions for me. And I'm going to do that into my utility. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this firebase functions.js. And I'm going to make some basic functions. First, I'm going to import Firebase from that Firebase folder we made a minute ago, where we exported our app. So I'm going to create a few different functions for us. Let's have our logout. And logout's not going to do much. It's just going to say Firebase. Oops. This should be Firebase .auth .sign out and invoke that. And these will return promises. Okay, let's also go ahead and do login. Export const login. This will take in an email and a password. And this will return our Firebase .auth .sign in with email and password. And we'll pass in email and password, like so. Great. Let's do sign up. Export const sign up. This will also take in email and password. Whoops. And we will call firebase.auth .create user with email and password, and pass in email and password. Right now, keep in mind, we could do this in our sign up files and all that, but I just like doing it in a helper function because I think it's a little bit cleaner. I'm also going to do this for later. I'm going to make a function to get a Firebase ID token. So I'm going to call this get Firebase ID token. This won't take in any arguments, and all this will do is firebase.auth, invoke it, grab the current user, and get an ID token for that user. Okay, great. So let's save that, and those are our helper functions. So now we can go ahead and update our signups and whatnot to have these helper functions and to actually use them. So let's start with our sign up. So let's go to our component. Let's choose sign up. And inside of our sign up, let's go ahead and import this. So we will import our helper function called sign up, which will be coming from our util/firebase functions. I call them firbase functions, I guess. Now would be a good time to rename that. So I'm going to do that now. Firebase. Great. It's complaining a little bit. I'm not sure. I'll just save it. Okay, great. It says password is not defined anywhere. I must be saying password. It's happening in our util function. Okay, so let's go back and look at that really quick. I probably have a misspelling. I do. I always do. So we'll go to our sign up, and when the user has signed up, so let's go ahead and get the response back when somebody tries to sign up. So let's say let res equal await and we'll call our sign up method we wrote. We'll pass in our email and password, and this should create a new user. And with that user, we can make a request to our database. So I'll also go await axios.post, and we can say the path. So we know it's going to be that API/users, and we have to pass in our object. So I'm going to point our ID equal to our res.user.uid, as well as having my email point to the email. Okay, so this should send it to our Firebase, and then when this is successful, we will get our new user. So let's just try and see if this part works. So we'll go to our sign up page, and let's go ahead and write test@test.com. Or let's first actually just say test@test. And we'll pass in test as our sign up. And we get an error, and it says the email address is badly formatted. Great, that's good. So we'll say .com. We'll sign up, and we get pushed over to our user page. And we can still go back to sign up and log in, even though we are in there now, and we see we have a query and a test in the database. So our Firebase looks like it's working. Great. All right, so let's keep going. So we will add it to our login page next. So our login page needs to have a login imported from the top. So we will import our login from /util/firebase functions. And here we can just go ahead and log in. So we'll say await login and pass in our email and our password. So this one's harder to tell right now if we're really logged in or not. So we'll have to wait to really test that. Okay, let's continue on. So our next thing we want to do is allow a person to log out as well. So let's go ahead and add logout into the nav bar. So let's go to our nav bar and import logout. So we'll import logout from .. we will go to our util, our Firebase functions. Oops. Firebase functions. And let's go ahead and just add a button that will say logout. And on click, we will go ahead and log out. Great. So now we should have a little button here. We can't actually tell right now if we're logged in or logged out, but we will be able to soon. Okay. So the next thing is let's add the ability to have this user all around and logged in if we have a user. So in order to do this, I'm going to make use of React's context API and pass the user to the entire application. So let's go back to our app, and I'm going to make a new folder in source, and I'm going to call this providers. And this provider is going to be our auth context. So I'm going to make a file called auth context.js. And so I know I'm going to be using React. So import React from React. I'm also going to be using create context because I want to create my context here. So I'm going to export const auth context. And I'm going to make that, whoops, our create context. Great. Now let's go ahead and make our provider. So const auth provider. This is going to take in the children. So this is whatever's passed into it. And I'm going to export so I don't forget. Okay. Oops. And this will return our auth context. Whoops. Auth context dot provider. And it's going to have a value of some stuff which we haven't determined yet. So I want my app to have a loading state. So while I'm determining whether or not there's a current user, I want this app to be loading. I also want to keep track of a current user, and I also want to have a token that I can throw into the send back into the backend for protected routes in our backend later on. So I'm going to add use state. Whoops. And let's go ahead and use that. So const, I'm going to say loading, set loading, and I'm going to start this as an initial value of true, because I don't want there to be like these any flashes at all. I just want to immediately have it show this loading until we actually know whether or not we have a user. I'm also going to have a current user and a set current user. And I'm going to start these off as null. And I'm also going to do a token. So I'm going to have a token and a set token, and those will also be null. Great. I know I'm also going to have to check right away if we have a user. So I'm going to make use of our component demount behavior with a use effect. So, and I know my value here is I'm actually going to want to pass my current user as well as the token. And if things are loading, I just want to return a div that says loading. Maybe I could do a fancy spinner or something, but for now, it's just going to be loading. So let's go ahead and use our effect. And this is going to take in a callback. And I only want this to run the one time. And I'm going to call firebase. So I also need firebase here because I want to listen for any auth state change. So I'm going to import firebase from our firebase. And I'm going to want to capture that listener so that I can remove it when this component unmounts. So I'm going to call const unsubscribe. I'm going to assign that to our firebase.auth, invoke it, say on auth state changed, I need to fire some callback function that takes in a user. So I'm just going to call update user for now, and then I'm going to write that. And whenever this component unmounts, I'm just want to unsubscribe. So I'm going to return unsubscribe. So I'm using this use effect for its component did mount and its component will unmount behavior. Now let's write the function for update user. So update user is going to be taking in a user. It's first going to check if we actually have a user. Else, we're going to be setting our current user to null. And I'm also going to set loading to false because we have finished checking, even though we don't have a current user. In the event that we do have a user, I'm going to go ahead and take out the email from it and the UID. And I want to get the last login just for fun. So login, and I'm going to get user.metadata .last login. And I'm going to set my current user. So this current user is going to have this email. It's going to have an email. It's going to have a last login. It's also going to have an ID pointing to the UID. Okay, because that way I have the same ID. I'm just going to keep with anything I'm doing with my project. I'm going to keep it with an ID. Lastly, I need to go get the firebase token. And then I want to take that token and set my token to token, and also go ahead and set my loading to false. Okay, so this should work. And let's go check if this is going to work. Oh, we also need to throw in our children. Sorry, almost forgot. Let's wrap our app and see if it loads and all of that. So we're going to go back to our app. We will want to use, no, we don't need to use any context. Instead, we will just go ahead and say auth provider and wrap our entire app in this auth provider. So I'm just going to wrap everything, move that. Okay, great. So now, and I'll just tab everything in one. So now we've got this auth provider, and we should see that we have this little loading screen now. Sometimes. Let's log out. So it's happening very, very fast. But I believe it's happening. But based off whether or not we have a user, let's either show log out or log in and sign up. So let's go make a couple updates. Let's do that first in our nav bar. So here, we need to pull out use context, because we're going to be using our context. And we also need to get our auth context. So I'm going to import auth context from our providers auth context. So let's go ahead and pull out the current user. So I'm going to say current user, and I'm going to use context and pass in auth context. Great. From here, we can do a little bit of logic. So I'm going to just make a function called const display buttons. And it's going to say, hey, if there is a current user, we are going to return this logout button, because we want our user to be able to log out. Else, we are going to return our login and sign up. So return, gonna go ahead and make these a React fragment and remove our button and links in here, and instead call display buttons and invoke it. And let's see if this works. So right now we're not signed in, and we see that we have a login and a sign up, but no sign out. Now let's go ahead and log in at test@test.com. So we'll say test@test.com, test, log in, get pushed, and we no longer see a sign up or a login. We just see the log out. So pretty cool. We're getting there, right? So we definitely have this current user, and on a refresh, we see that loading, and we see that we don't see that sign up at all. Now, let's say I have kind of a mischievous user. And even though I'm currently logged in, they are trying to go to sign up. This is an unwanted behavior. I do not want my users to go and see the sign up page. In the same context, when I'm signed out, I don't want users to be able to see the show all users. So let's go fix this problem now. To start this, we are going to add another utility, and I'm going to call this route util to help with our routes. So I'm going to say routes util.js. I'll get normal. Routes util.js. And in here, I am going to import our React from React. Oops. And I'm going to be using context again because I want to determine whether or not I have a user. In addition to using context, I'm also going to use route and redirect from the React router DOM. This is going to allow me to use routes and to redirect from React router DOM. Let's also import our context. So auth context from provider / auth context. Okay, so the first route is I'm going to make it so if somebody signed in, they can't go to this route. So these are what I'm going to call auth routes. So if you're signed in, I don't want you to be able to go to the sign up page or the login page. So I'm going to say export const auth route. This is going to take in children as well as any other arguments. And what this is going to do is it's going to get our current user again, just like what we did in the nav bar. From our use context, where we'll pass in our auth context. My mistake, do not want our provider. Context, don't want this. Okay. And now we will return a route. So we'll say route. And we'll, depending on, and we'll have it have a, I'll take all those REST properties in there. And then we'll have a render. And we'll say which components we want to render. So in the location. And here we'll return if there's a current user, we will show the children. So if there's no current user, show the children. Otherwise, I want to redirect. And I'm going to choose to redirect to our home page because I believe anyone can see that, and that's fair. Okay. Now our protected route is very similar. So I'm actually going to just rip it and call this protected route. And instead of saying current user, not current user, I'm going to say if current user show children. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and just redirect our person to the login page. Okay, so these two routes should allow us to control what pages our users can actually go to. So let's go ahead and add these in the app and see if they actually work. So we'll go back to our app and let's go ahead and import these new routes. So I'm going to import auth route and protected route, and I'm going to import that from our util at routes util. And so our users route, we said we want those to be protected. So I'm just going to make that a protected route. And our sign up and our login should be tabbed in, sorry. These, we said, we're going to be auth routes. So we'll say auth route. Now, let's go ahead and check the behavior of our application. So we have our login. We're currently not signed in. I'm going to try to go to our show all users. And we see I can't. I can go to home, but as soon as I try to go to show all users, I end up on the login page. Okay, well, let's go ahead and log in. And we will go test, login. Okay, and let's have that mischievous user. And I'm going to try to go to the login page. And it does not let me. It routes me back, right? I have to go to a sign up. It's going to do our loading, and then it's going to push me back to our home component. Great. Looks like it's working. So now we have the ability to really have front-end authentication. Let's add it now to our backend. and see what else we have left. We will do that in the next video.